The bright white light from the LED strips on the ceiling of the Eos Prime medical station illuminated everything, creating an atmosphere that felt both modern and cold. The space was so quiet that the hum of diagnostic machines echoed through every corner of the room, a constant reminder of technology's impotence in the face of the unknown illness afflicting a young patient. Dr. Thalen, one of the station's top medical experts, walked slowly into the main treatment area. He was no ordinary doctor. As a zenith, his body was encased in a silvery metal shell that could regulate temperature, shield against radiation, and reflect light. His eyes, large and deep, flickered with a greenish glow from the biosensors integrated into his skull. As Thalen entered, each step seemed to carry the weight of the station's collective desperation and tension. On the diagnostic bed lay Lyra, a member of the Aurian species, motionless. Her species' characteristic translucent skin, always vibrant and changing in color with emotions, was now a pale blue, as though the light from within her body had faded. Lyra was only 8 years old, but the burden of her illness seemed to have aged her, far beyond her years. Her weak breathing was steady but labored, each breath a struggle. Lyra's parents stood in the corner of the room, their hands tightly clasped together, their eyes betraying an overwhelming sense of fear. Aurian people, with their large eyes that reflected light, typically conveyed strong emotions through their gaze. But now, their eyes were just pools of watery reflection, clouded by tears and hopelessness. They spoke to each other in their native Aurian language, a string of clear notes that sounded like music, yet carried an undeniable sense of anxiety. She can't hold on much longer, Thalen thought to himself as he scanned the results on the diagnostic screens. Biological charts and data flashed before him, but none of it provided any clues about Lyra's illness. Her body temperature was high, her heart rate was up to 190 beats per minute, but all other biochemical markers were within normal limits. Each line of cause unknown that appeared on the screen felt like an accusation. Modern medicine could not save this child. May, an android nurse specially designed for complex cases, entered the room with her cold, efficient demeanor. Her slender form, coated in matte black metal, reflected light softly. May was Thalen's most trusted assistant. She placed a new biological data sheet on the control panel and spoke in her usual monotone, emotionless voice. The patient shows no signs of improvement. Blood oxygen levels are stable, but respiratory rate has increased by 12% over the past hour. Thalen did not respond immediately. He closed his eyes for a moment, adjusting his biosensors to focus his thoughts. In his mind, he ran through all the medical knowledge he had accumulated, both learned and witnessed over his long career. But it was all leading him to a dead end. Could this be a new phenomenon? Thalen murmured, his voice filled with unease. He turned to May. Have we sent the data to the Intergalactic Medical Center yet? Sent it 2 hours ago. No response yet. They requested more biological samples, but I don't think it will help. May replied, they want additional samples, but I'm not sure what it will change. As the conversation unfolded, Lyra's parents approached the diagnostic bed. They gently placed their hands on her small hand, whispering prayers in their native tongue. Their eyes turned to Thalen, silently clinging to whatever shred of hope he might offer. Thalen did not meet their gaze. He knew the weight of that look. It was not just a plea for help, but also an unspoken reproach for the shortcomings of modern medicine, for the technology they had once placed their absolute trust in. Thalen, you need to rest. May's voice broke through his thoughts. Your biosensors indicate you've exceeded the optimal operating threshold for a zenith. Thalen shook his head. No, I can't stop. If I leave now, I'll never forgive myself. May was silent, but her gaze reflected a level of empathy that few would expect from an android. She knew that Thalen was not just a doctor. He was a man carrying the responsibility for every life on the station. A small alarm sounded from the diagnostic machine. Lyra's heart rate spiked to 210 beats per minute. May quickly approached the control panel, her electronic eyes scanning the data. "We need to act now," Thalen declared, his voice more certain than ever. He knew their time was running out, and without some kind of breakthrough, Lyra wouldn't survive. In the midst of the tension, the door to the medical room suddenly opened. A man walked in, wearing a rumpled white lab coat, his hair unkempt and dark circles under his eyes. He looked out of place among the station's usual inhabitants, a human from Earth. "I hear you have a tough case. Maybe I can help." All eyes turned to him, and though no one said it aloud, they all shared the same thought. What could an Earthling possibly do that the entire intergalactic medical community had failed to accomplish? The door to the treatment area slid open with a soft hiss as the automatic mechanisms engaged. The white light from the medical room reflected off the worn metal surface of Dr. Liam Carter's lab coat. He entered, holding a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and pushing the heavy door with the other. His tall, lean figure, messy brown hair, and sharp eyes stood out against the cold, sterile space of the medical station. Liam exuded a confident, almost playful energy, a trademark of Earthlings, a trait not everyone appreciated, especially Dr. Thalen. "I hear you have a tough case," Liam said, his tone a mix of humor and fatigue. He took a sip of his coffee and placed the cup on a nearby control panel, disregarding Thalen's annoyed gaze. Thalen, who had been standing rigidly, intensely focused for hours, turned to look at Liam. His metallic shell emitted a faint glow, reflecting his discontent as he spoke. "This is not your area of expertise, Dr. Carter. The Aurian body is vastly different from that of a human." Liam shrugged and moved toward the central control panel, where Lyra's biological data was continuously displayed. "Well, we won't know until we try, right?" he said casually, his eyes scanning the data at an unexpectedly fast pace. His finger tapped lightly on the screen, his expression more curious than stressed. How could a human doctor understand the complex biology of an Aurian? Thalen asked, his voice skeptical. Liam didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied the charts carefully. After a few moments, he turned back, his eyes gleaming as though he had just had a breakthrough. "Maybe she's running a fever," he said, a smirk playing on his lips, signaling his usual confidence. Thalen raised an eyebrow and stepped closer. "A fever? You mean the body is raising its temperature to fight an infection? That's impossible. Aurian biology doesn't have such a mechanism." "It's not impossible at all," Liam replied quickly. "The human body does it all the time, and maybe the Aurian species has a similar mechanism we haven't discovered yet. Look here." He pointed to a graph showing an abnormal increase in Lyra's white blood cell count. "This suggests her body is trying to protect itself. See that?" Thalen remained unconvinced. "But if that's the case, why hasn't the diagnostic system picked it up? Our technology is more advanced than any biological brain." Liam smirked lightly and walked toward Lyra's diagnostic bed. He placed a hand on the control panel and fixed his gaze on the girl. "That's exactly the problem. The system is too advanced. It's probably looking for something more complicated than the reality. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the ones we overlook." Lyra's parents, still standing quietly in the corner, unconsciously stepped closer. They didn't understand the details of the conversation, but their hopeful eyes were directed at Liam. Thalen, though not entirely agreeing, kept watching the Earth Doctor's every move. Liam pulled up a chair and leaned in, observing Lyra's pale face, her eyelids barely open, her breath faint. "She's fighting, that's clear, but she needs a push to finish this battle." "What do you mean?" Thalen asked, his voice still cold, though no longer fully dismissive. "I mean we need to support her body's natural mechanisms instead of trying to fix everything with machines. Some anti-inflammatory medication or temperature stabilizers from humans could help, but the dosage needs to be adjusted. I need access to the Intergalactic pharmaceutical database. Human medication could harm an Aurian's body." Thalen snapped, his voice rising in volume, which caused May, the android nurse, to turn and take notice. Good thing I'm not suggesting using them without testing first, right? Liam replied, keeping a light smile. Look, I know this sounds crazy, but we don't have time to argue about medical principles. If I'm wrong, the girl will still have a chance to survive while we search for another solution. But if I'm right, we can save her now. Do you dare take that bet, Thalen? Thalen stood still, his mind racing. Liam wasn't entirely wrong. Despite being a Zenith, Thalen understood that sometimes modern technology couldn't replace human intuition and experience. May, grant access to the pharmaceutical database. Thalen ordered after a brief pause. May nodded, her electronic eyes flashing. As she complied, access granted. Dr. Carter, you have limited access for 30 minutes. Thank you, May, Liam said, giving a brief nod to her before diving into the list of medications. His fingers moved swiftly over the touchscreen, selecting compounds compatible with Aurian biology. Thalen stood nearby, his eyes fixed on Liam's actions. Doubt still lingered within him, but somewhere a glimmer of hope had started to spark. Could Liam's gut instinct approach be the key to saving Lyra? The medical bay of Eos Prime had never witnessed a suggestion as strange as the one made by Dr. Liam Carter. Dr. Thalen, with his towering figure and gleaming metallic shell, stood silently before Liam's proposal. The words from Liam, a suggestion that sounded like something out of an Earth fairy tale, seemed entirely out of place in the cold, technologically advanced space, where cutting-edge science was considered the ultimate savior. Chicken soup? Thalen repeated, his voice dripping with skepticism. Two long sensors atop his head quivered slightly, reflecting his surprise at the suggestion. That's right, Liam replied, his gaze unwavering. I know it sounds silly, but sometimes the solution doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't just provide nutrition and warmth. It also brings comfort, something we often overlook when caring for patients. Thalen still didn't believe it. You're talking about a dish. Do you realize how absurd this is? The Aurian body might not even be able to digest human ingredients. Liam raised his hand in a gesture to pause the conversation. Exactly, and that's why I need to check each ingredient carefully. Let me explain. He moved closer to the diagnostic screen, displaying the current condition of Lyra. Look here, the girl is running out of energy. If we provide easily absorbable nutrition and boost her immune system, her body will have a chance to heal itself. And I believe a bowl of chicken soup can help with that. Thalen's expression grew more serious. You want to replace our most advanced medical tools with a folk remedy? Not replace, but supplement. Liam corrected him. Technology isn't always the answer. Sometimes, the simplest things are what we need. Silence filled the room as Thalen pondered the idea. In the corner, Lyra's parents, who had stayed silent during the conversation, exchanged looks with one another. Their hope conflicted with the doubt they felt about this strange solution. Finally, Thalen sighed, the sound of metal softly echoing. Fine. If this is our only chance, I'll agree, but I will closely monitor the process. Liam smiled, a warm and confident smile. Perfect. Now, I need to contact the kitchen. In the Eos Prime kitchen, May, the android nurse, had already prepared the ingredients as requested by Liam. The chefs, accustomed to creating complex meals from synthesized materials, now face an entirely new challenge: recreating an Earth classic. Chicken? We don't have any fresh meat, just synthetic protein. The head chef complained, his mechanical hands swirling as he scanned the list of ingredients. Synthetic protein will work. Just add natural ingredients that the Aurian digestive system can handle. Liam said, his tone patient. He listed the ingredients: broth, basic vegetables like carrots and celery, and a touch of mineral salt for flavor. Thalen, standing beside Liam, watched quietly. Are you sure all of these are safe? Absolutely. I've cross-checked every ingredient based on the girl's biological data. We'll adjust the temperature and salt levels to avoid any side effects. Liam replied, never taking his eyes off the cooking process. When the final bowl of soup was ready, it was carefully placed in a sterilized box, ready to be brought to the treatment room. The warm, subtle aroma of the soup filled the air, a strange sensation in the sterile atmosphere of the space station. Back in the treatment room, Liam carefully lifted the first spoonful of soup toward Lyra's mouth. Thalen stood close by, his sensors continuously scanning the girl's biological readings. "We'll do this bit by bit," observing her body's response. Liam said, his expression more serious than before. He scooped a small spoonful and gently placed it in Lyra's mouth. At first, nothing happened. The girl remained motionless, but after a few minutes, the biological monitor began to show small changes. Lyra's body temperature, which had been dangerously high, dropped slightly. Her heart rate also stabilized, though it was still weak. "Look," Liam pointed to the screen, his eyes full of hope. Thalen leaned in closer, his sensors twitching as he recognized the real changes happening. "This could be a coincidence," he muttered, but there was no hiding the surprise in his voice. "Maybe, but it's a start. We'll keep going." Liam insisted. Lyra's parents stepped closer, their eyes welling up as they watched the color of their daughter's skin gradually change, from pale to a faint pink, a fragile but clear sign of recovery. Hours passed as Liam and Thalen continued working tirelessly. The chicken soup was adjusted little by little to meet the girl's needs. By the time the screen showed more stable biological readings, a deep, emotional silence filled the room. "You really did it," Thalen admitted, his voice softer than usual. "Maybe we underestimated the power of what seems so ordinary." Liam smiled faintly. "Sometimes, life needs care from the smallest things," he said, his gaze turned toward Lyra, who was drifting into the first peaceful sleep she'd had in days. When the first spoonful of soup was brought to Lyra's lips, the entire room seemed to stop moving. Her parents stood close by, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear. They watched for the slightest change in their daughter's pale face. Thalen, with the cautious nature of a zenith, remained motionless, his sensors flickering as they picked up every tiny shift in the air. Dr. Liam Carter, the only human doctor on Eos Prime, simply held his breath, his gaze fixed firmly on Lyra's biometric readings. The warm spoonful slid down her throat, a weak but hopeful motion. The moments that followed seemed to stretch on forever. Each person in the room was absorbed in a tense waiting state, where both advanced technology and faith were put to the ultimate test. Unable to hold back, Thalen ramped up his sensors to their highest setting, scanning every cell of Lyra's body. The digestive process had started. He murmured, his silver eyes blinking rapidly as the flood of biological data filled his mind. Liam stayed calm, despite the beads of sweat forming on his brow. "We need more time. Let her body adjust." About an hour later, the vital signs began to shift. Lyra's body temperature dropped slightly, from the dangerously high 42 degrees Celsius to 39 degrees Celsius. Her previously erratic heart rate started to stabilize. Data from the scanners indicated that, though still faint, her energy was beginning to show signs of recovery. "Unbelievable," Thalen whispered, his voice filled with astonishment. "That simple nutrition is actually helping her body rebalance." Lyra's parents could no longer hold back their tears. Her mother, with trembling hands, gently grasped her daughter's cold hand, whispering prayers. Her father, trying to maintain a strong facade, but with red-rimmed eyes, could not hide the spark of hope that had just been ignited. Seeing that Lyra's body was responding positively, Liam kept moving forward with his plan. "We need to continue providing this nutrition, but we must adjust the temperature and concentration. Her digestive system is still very fragile." He quickly instructed the medical team to prepare more soup with slight adjustments to the formula. "So, this isn't a miracle," Thalen said, his tone becoming more rational after the initial shock had passed. "She's simply reacting to a source of energy her body can process." Liam looked at him, a faint smile curling at the corners of his mouth. If you need a scientific explanation to accept this, then yes, it's not a miracle. But sometimes, the simplest things lead to the most unexpected results. Thalen wasn't one to easily admit failure. As a Zenith doctor, he had spent decades training in an advanced medical environment where biotechnology was regarded as the pinnacle of all solutions. The idea that a primitive method like chicken soup could yield positive results was something he never would have imagined. We need to understand why. Thalen said, his expression serious. We can't just rely on personal experience and ignore the scientific factors. Liam nodded in agreement. We'll analyze it. But right now, the priority is saving her life. Research can wait. 3 hours later, Lyra had managed to digest 3 small spoonfuls of soup. The faint pink color was returning to her almost translucent skin. Her biometric readings continued to improve, slowly but steadily. Thalen continued scanning the data, analyzing every minute change. I've discovered something interesting. The protein in the soup isn't just being digested. It's also stimulating the production of an endogenous enzyme I've never seen before. Endogenous enzyme? Liam furrowed his brow. That could be the key. Can you isolate it? I'll need some time, but yes, I can. Thalen replied, his eyes gleaming with the excitement of a scientist on the verge of a new discovery. Meanwhile, outside the treatment room, the atmosphere of Eos Prime began to buzz with excitement. News of Lyra's recovery quickly spread, becoming the topic of lively discussion across the station. Some people viewed it as a miracle, while others, like Thalen, considered it just a random result of an experiment. But for Lyra's parents, it didn't matter what the explanation was. They only knew that their daughter was recovering, and that was enough. Thank you, her mother said, her eyes brimming with tears as she looked at Liam. You've brought my daughter back from the brink. Liam just smiled softly. We're only doing what needed to be done. But trust me, Lyra is a strong warrior. In the corner of the room, Thalen stood silently, lost in thought as he watched Lyra. He didn't speak, but in his eyes, there was a new light. It wasn't the light of disappointment or doubt, but of curiosity, respect, and a hint of humility, things he had never felt before when facing a human doctor. Lyra drifted into a peaceful sleep, while those around her, each in their own way, felt that something much larger had just occurred. In just 12 short hours, the calm on Eos Prime completely evaporated. The sound of alarm sirens, hurried footsteps, and the frantic voices of medical staff filled the endless hallways. Thalen walked into the main treatment room, the silver light from his exterior reflecting oddly in the already tense atmosphere. Before him lay an unprecedented sight. Another 20 Aurian children on diagnostic beds, all showing the same symptoms as Lyra, translucent skin turning green, high body temperature, and abnormal heart rhythms. Another case. A nurse shouted from the door, pushing in another emergency bed with a young Aurian boy. This is spreading. This isn't a coincidence. Thalen murmured, his sensors vibrating as he tried to process the massive amount of information. We're facing a biological crisis. Meanwhile, Dr. Liam Carter, with dark circles under his eyes from lack of sleep, had no time to ponder the scale of the disaster. He was standing in the station's kitchen, which had been converted into an emergency chicken soup production line. Cooks, engineers, and even staff from other departments were involved. The kitchen had become a battlefield, and chicken soup was a weapon. Add water to pot number 3. Don't let it boil too long. We need to preserve the nutritional value. Liam shouted, his voice cutting through the rumbling machines and murmurs of conversation. A young engineer, hands smeared with machine oil, hesitated before asking, Dr. Carter, are you sure this is actually going to work? Liam turned, his gaze sharp. I don't have time to be sure, but so far, this is the only thing that's working. So we keep going. Thalen entered the kitchen, struggling to believe what he was seeing. He couldn't shake the absurdity of the situation. An advanced space station, equipped with cutting-edge technology, now relying on a simple human dish to deal with a medical crisis. "What are you doing?" Thalen asked, his voice deep but clear, enough to cut through the bustling atmosphere of the room. Liam didn't stop stirring the large pot of soup as he replied, "Saving lives, Thalen. If you have a better idea, I'm happy to hear it. But right now, we don't have time to debate. This is not how science works," Thalen countered, his sensors flickering strongly. "We don't understand why chicken soup is working. This goes against every principle of medicine." Liam paused, meeting Thalen's gaze. What principle is more important than keeping these children alive? Don't let your theories block reality. Thalen fell silent, unable to argue. Though he didn't want to admit it, Liam was right. As the first bowls of soup were brought into the treatment room, nurses worked tirelessly to feed each child spoonful by spoonful. Lyra, the first to be tested, was now able to sit up and speak, though her voice was still weak. This gave the parents of the other children immense hope. "We need to speed up. This amount of soup isn't enough for all the patients." A nurse reported, her voice full of worry. "I'll talk to the supply team. We need more ingredients," Liam said, quickly leaving the room. In the command office of the station, Colonel Myra Solon, the commander of Eos Prime, was closely monitoring the situation. In front of her were detailed reports, but like Thalen, she couldn't believe that something as simple as chicken soup was becoming the centerpiece of the survival fight. "What is Carter doing?" Myra asked, looking at her assistant. "He's turned the kitchen into a food production line. According to reports, patient conditions are improving, but we don't know why." Myra frowned. "We can't let this continue without understanding the cause. Get in touch with Thalen. Tell him to prioritize analyzing the patient samples." Back in the lab, Thalen and his team worked tirelessly to find answers. A small sample from Lyra's body was carefully analyzed, and the first discoveries began to emerge. "This is an enzyme I've never seen before. It doesn't exist in any recorded species," Thalen said, his voice tense. "I believe this pathogen attacked the Aurian body by suppressing the ability to produce this enzyme, and somehow, chicken soup has triggered it to reactivate." "How?" a technician asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe it's a combination of animal proteins and simple organic compounds. But this shows that we could create a treatment based on the compounds from the soup." The next 12 hours passed in a frenzy of work. Eos Prime was no longer a quiet space station. It had turned into a battleground where advanced technology and human ingenuity joined forces to combat an unknown threat. The Aurian children slowly recovered, but the biggest question remained unanswered. Where did this pathogen come from? In the main medical lab of Eos Prime, the faint blue light from the biological display screens casting over the Aurian patient's data illuminated Thalen's tense face. He stood motionless, his head sensors vibrating lightly as he analyzed the data he had just collected. On the screen, a series of complex charts and numbers showed the interaction between the chicken soup's chemical composition and the enzymes in the Aurian body. "This is absurd but undeniable," Thalen murmured, his voice full of contradiction. Liam Carter entered, holding a cup of cold coffee, his eyes tired yet filled with confidence. He noticed the hesitation in Thalen's voice and couldn't help but chuckle. "You're about to admit that our classic soup actually works, aren't you?" Liam said, a half smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Don't celebrate yet." Thalen shot a glance at Liam and pointed at the screen. "What I found is truly astonishing. Chicken soup isn't just a simple dish as you claimed. It activates a controlled immune response in the Aurian body, adjusting the imbalance caused by the pathogen. But why it works, that still remains unclear. Maybe their bodies like our warm approach," Liam said, his voice tinged with humor, though his gaze was sharp. "Science can be lofty, but sometimes we need to get back to basics." While Thalen and Liam continued to debate the mechanism, The station's technical team had finished replicating the enzyme samples found in the bodies of the Aurian patients after they were given the chicken soup. Initial results showed that this enzyme not only played a crucial role in immune regulation, but also had the potential to stop the pathogen's development. "We're seeing a medical breakthrough here, Thalen," a technician said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "Breakthrough or not, this needs further validation." Thalen responded, but deep inside, he felt himself being swayed. In the treatment area, Lyra, the first Aurian child to be tested with the chicken soup, had significantly improved. Her skin, which had previously been pale and greenish, was now returning to its natural translucent hue. Lyra looked at her mother, offering a weak yet vibrant smile. "Mom, I want more soup," Lyra whispered, her voice light as a breeze. Her mother burst into tears, her hands trembling as she stroked her daughter's soft hair. "Thank you, doctors, thank you, everyone." The scene spread throughout the station through medical reports and videos from the staff. The morale of everyone lifted higher than ever, despite the initial chaos. In the command conference room, Colonel Myra Solon was reviewing reports from the research team. In front of her was a detailed file sent by Thalen, describing how the chicken soup affected the Aurian immune system. "Thalen, are you telling me that a simple human dish has saved an entire species?" Myra asked, her tone tinged with skepticism. "I'm saying that, reluctantly, science can't deny this. But I want to emphasize that this is not due to the chicken soup alone. It interacts with a special enzyme in the Aurian body, and we still need more research." "Then research it. But remember, we're racing against time. If this pathogen originates from outside, it could come back at any moment." On the other side of the station, Liam continued leading the kitchen team, but this time with the assistance of an automated system that he had requested the technical team to install. Kitchen robots had replaced the human staff in stirring the pots, checking temperatures, and measuring the exact amount of ingredients needed. "We can't keep cooking by hand forever. This isn't just a crisis, it's a test of our adaptability," Liam said to his team. An elderly chef who had worked on the station for over a decade smiled. "You know, Liam, I never thought I'd be using my cooking skills to save lives." "Welcome to modern science, old man," Liam replied, a brief smile flickering across his face. Despite the positive progress, Thalen couldn't shake his worries. He felt something wasn't quite right. The latest analysis showed that the pathogen wasn't just attacking the Aurian body, it also seemed to be adapting to the environment. "We're dealing with an evolving organism," Thalen said to Liam in a private meeting. "If it learns how to resist the effects of the chicken soup, we'll lose our only advantage. Then we need to stay one step ahead." Liam responded, "I don't believe chicken soup is a final solution, but it's opened a door, and now we need to keep exploring." The two men, representing two different civilizations, looked at each other. Though their starting points and perspectives were different, they both understood that they were fighting together for one common goal: the survival of the life forms on Eos Prime. Belief in science and collaboration had brought a spark of hope, but it also raised many new questions. If this pathogen originated from outside the station, could this be a deliberate attack? And if so, who or what was behind it all? Within 48 hours, the atmosphere on Eos Prime slowly changed. From chaos and tension, it shifted to a sense of relief tinged with astonishment. The Aurian patients, once in critical condition, were now miraculously stable. The treatment rooms, once filled with the flashing lights of machinery, had become quieter, with only the soft sounds of monitoring devices remaining. In the main treatment area, Lyra, the first child to be saved by the chicken soup, was now able to sit up. Her once translucent skin had returned to its natural state, reflecting the gentle light from the medical screens. She smiled faintly, her bright eyes looking towards her parents. "How do you feel, Lyra?" Liam Carter entered the room, holding a cup of coffee he never seemed to finish. "I'm fine, Doctor," Lyra answered, her voice soft but clear. She looked at him with curiosity. I heard you saved us with chicken soup. Liam chuckled, setting the coffee cup down on the table next to the bed. It's no miracle, just chicken soup. He turned to look at Thalen, who was standing off to the side, observing the situation with a thoughtful expression. The Eos Prime conference room was illuminated by soft white lights, where all the leaders and scientists had gathered. A detailed report from the research team was projected onto the large screen, documenting all the information regarding the chicken soup miracle. We have witnessed something unprecedented in interstellar history. Colonel, Myra Solon stood up to speak. This is not just a medical success, but also a testament to the potential for cooperation between civilizations. But the question remains, what really happened? Thalen, calm yet serious, stepped forward to the screen. He reached out to the control panel, displaying graphs of the biological reactions in the Aurian patients. Based on our analysis, Thalen began, chicken soup is not just food. Its components, when combined with the natural enzymes in the Aurian body, triggered a unique immune response, soothing the attack from the pathogen and helping the body self-regulate. But what's noteworthy is, why is this pathogen attacking only young Aurian individuals? The room fell silent. This was a question no one could answer definitively. Liam stood up, breaking the silence. We can't overlook the possibility that this is not a natural phenomenon. This pathogen is too intelligent, and the way it spreads suggests there's a hand behind it. You mean this could be a biological attack? Myra asked, her gaze sharp. We can't rule that out, Liam replied, his voice more serious. If this pathogen is man-made, the one who created it could be watching us. And if they see we found a way to fight it off, what's to stop them from developing a new version? On the station's internal communication channels, the story of the chicken soup quickly spread. Everyone on the station, from engineers and scientists to kitchen staff, spoke of the miracle as a testament to the extraordinary power of medicine and the magic found in the simplest things. But for Thalen, the joy of victory did not diminish his concerns. In the lab, he spent hours analyzing the remaining pathogen samples. Under the microscope, he noticed troubling signs. The pathogen's structure was so complex that it seemed impossible to have occurred naturally. This is a design, Thalen muttered, not a coincidence. When Liam entered, Thalen immediately shared his discovery. If I'm right, this pathogen isn't just intended to cause harm. It could be a test, or worse, a warning. A test of what? Liam asked. Our ability to react, Thalen answered, his eyes filled with concern. Whoever created this wants to know if we can overcome it. Far away from Eos Prime, in a dark corner of space, a mysterious ship hovered in the shadows. Inside, beings with cold, bright eyes were monitoring data. On holographic screens, they exchanged words in a strange language, but one word was repeated over and over: human. As Liam left the treatment area at the end of the day, he sat down at the station's small bar and ordered a glass of whiskey. A few colleagues walked over, congratulating him for the chicken soup miracle. But Liam merely smiled faintly. It's not a miracle, he said, his gaze distant as he looked out the large window at the starry sky. It's just the beginning. The story of the chicken soup miracle may have become a legend across the galaxy, but for people like Liam and Thalen, they knew that countless questions still remained unanswered. They were not just fighting disease, they might be facing forces beyond their understanding.